Hey, I'm David Adelsheim. The story of Adelsheim Vineyard began in 1971. That was the year that Ginny and I decided to risk our life savings on a piece of property in Oregon's North Willamette Valley. Looking back now, we were one of just 10 families that made wine before 1980 from grapes planted on our properties in that region. To celebrate the 50th anniversary of what became our first vineyard, we wanted to tell our story. But we quickly realized that the only way to truly tell our story was to tell the stories of that entire first generation. Our winery team proposed an idea, a series of video conversations with the founders of those first 10 wineries and me. I loved it and set to work contacting my old friends. In each interview, we wanted to go beyond their widely known histories to discover who these people really were and what led them to build our uniquely collaborative, and at least from today's perspective, incredibly successful wine industry. This is our shared story. We met with Diana Lett of the Eyrie Vineyards on October 5th, 2020, in the yard behind her home, looking at their second oldest vineyard planting. Soon after their wedding in October of 1966, Diana and David Lett started transplanting 3,000 young vines from a nursery David had planted near Corvallis in February 1965, using what Diana calls her wedding shovel. But I'm jumping ahead. Let's get the real story from Diana. So we're sitting, your house is over there, and the second vineyard you and David planted is right behind us. We're sitting in the middle of your driveway.
Yes.
We would be hit by the dump truck if it came in delivering gravel.
Yes.
But it's such a cool place. And it allows us, this is the view that I remember when we were in your kitchen and in the dining room. These are the vines that we saw.
Yeah.
And probably the first time I met you, they weren't even planted yet, but they were in process.
No. They were in process. We had just bought the property,
right,
the house, and it had this 2.5, 3 acres here in the back. And so and it was cleared, so we were ready to start planting some more Pinot Noir back here. And this is our home vineyard. And I have really cute pictures of Jim and Jason as just little tots carrying big buckets of grapevines to put in here, and lots of friends helping plant. By that time, we had enough friends to help, so.
One of the things that we're trying to do with these 10 videos is to get an idea of what life was really like in the 1970s. Or in the 60s even for you. People who visit wineries in the Willamette Valley today.
Oh, it's so different. It's another planet, yes.
And I guess partly is because there was no wine industry. It was literally being created out of thin air at that point. It was being created by people who did not have wealth.
That's for sure.
Yeah. And who were working second or third or fifth jobs in order to supply enough income to be able to plant vineyards or buy beansteaks at 2 cents a piece or whatever. What I'm trying to look at first, though, is your husband, David, is pretty much the beginning of the wine industry. For most people, the story leads to David Lett and his escape from dental school and going to Davis and meeting people and starting to realize that Oregon would be a great place for this. And at Davis, you didn't yet know him.
Nope, I didn't know him at all then.
Yeah. So David had bought not this vineyard, but the vineyard just beyond that even before you met, right?
He had found it.
He had found it.
Yes.
And
Like
this
we're talking about just like days, you know?
Wow.
Everything all came together like ta-da.
And was this, he planted the nursery down in Corvallis in 65.
Well, he came up here in 1965 in January with his 3,000 cuttings and, you know, rounded up a real estate agent and wanted to start looking for vineyard land. But he also needed to get those cuttings in the ground. And so our real estate agent said, oh, I know, I've got a friend who's got some land. You can just put him on there. He's got water and, you know, have him start rooting and we'll start looking for vineyard land. So basically, that was the start. So those were the first Pinot Noir cuttings to come up here to the Willamette Valley.
Pinot Gris, for that matter,
Pinot
right?
Gris and a very Chardonnay, lots of that in that family of vinifera grapes.
Yeah.
And he had finished at Davis and he had traveled in Europe so he came up here and he was ready to get started.
I remember him telling me and others that when he was in Europe for that year, I mean, he visited Chuck Curry in Alsace, but he visited Portugal.
Oh, he went to England, Germany, France, Alsace, and northern Portugal. He had a letter of recommendation from his professors down at Davis, and he got the royal treatment wherever he went. And so he really got to talk to a lot of growers and producers and really looked into climate and what varieties were growing where and why. And one of the things was, why are you growing this variety here where it barely gets to maturity instead of something that's a lot easier? And they said, you know, well, because the flavors are better. And we weren't doing that in this country.
Right.
Well, our wine industry in this country was really just getting started.
Particularly for...
Anywhere in the country. Yeah, it was just, we were just on the beginning of that movement. So he had fallen in love with Pinot Noir, and that was it.
Why was he interested in Pinot? I mean, where did that come from?
Well, that was one of the benefits of being in class at the University of California at Davis. They had enough money to buy some really good Burgundies and pour tastings for the students. And David said that was his second cosmic brick. The first one was, oh, I think I'll grow grapes. And then the second was, I've got to do Pinot Noir. This is it. So then people said...
And that really came from that year and a half at Davis.
Yeah, those tastings at Davis, in his classes at Davis, yeah. So then he became very fascinated with, they're only growing this well in Burgundy. So is there someplace else it could grow? And so that put him on his quest.
And at one point he said, as far as he was concerned, there were three choices of where he wanted to settle down.
Where he thought that Pinot Noir could grow well.
Well, but one was northern Portugal.
Yeah, but
You think that was just romanticism?
Well, I think
was it the girl?
No, it was probably Coburn Port. He made a lot of good friends at Coburn Port. And they had all those lodges up in the mountains in northern Portugal. But he really did think, and we actually have some grand grapes growing in Portugal right now. They've got a nice vineyard up near Ponta de Lima in northern Portugal. So I don't think the winemaker there probably, well, I probably don't need to be saying this. You can cut this out. Sorry. They may not specialize in making Pinot Noir.
Probably not. Yeah.
But the grapes may be fine. I don't know. Yeah. So.
I mean, in essence, David and Chuck Curry, even Bill Fuller, were overlapped this 1 year at Davis.
Yeah. I think there were like 5 or 6 guys in this class. There was
even Koblet was kind of from Switzerland, was there not that year, but the year before.
Just right. They kind of overlapped. Yeah. They knew each other. Yeah. You know. Yeah. And he had. Yeah, Werner had been here. Chuck was interested in growing grapes in Oregon because he was from Oregon. And, and also he was wanting to do an adventure. David was like, well, I'm doing Pinot Noir. That's my focus, not just growing grapes. I want to do Pinot Noir. So. I think he was more interested in the grape growing and proving that could be done well. And I think David was interested in making good Pinot Noir.
Right.
And he did always say, wines are made in the vineyards, and it's the climate, stupid. You know, it's got to be, the climate has to be perfect.
I don't think I've used that term for 2 nights. I was on some interview a couple of days ago, and somebody was asking me, why is the Willamette Valley so important? And I used exactly...
Did you really? Because that just popped out of me right now, but it is. It's the
and
climate.
She thought I was calling her stupid.
Oh, no. No, I think there's a lot of... People make a lot of fuss about the soils and the different things like that, but the main thing is the climate. And we have this beautiful maritime, long growing season, cool. It was cooler.
Used to be.
It used to be cooler. Yeah. We can go higher now. So that was his quest.
Right.
Was Pinot Noir.
So that gets us to 65. David had planted the nursery in Corvallis.
And he was searching for vineyard.
Searching for vineyards with a realtor. And that, I presume, was sort of in the summer, because he planted that vineyard in, March?
February.
February, that's right.
February, finished in February.
Yep.
Had him in. And then he was working for Weeks Berry Nursery at 75 cents an hour, and that wasn't going to make it. So he landed a job just by total coincidence with Scott Forsman Textbook Publishing Company. And he was their Northwest salesman from California all the way up to Alaska. It was a great territory. So, and he started making friends with various bookmen. Story to be continued.
But one of the bookmen that he became friends with was actually a woman, because you started into the book business too.
That's right. And that's how I got involved. Was in 1966, in June, I got out of school in Dallas, and I got a job with Scott Forsman College Textbook Publishing Company as, they were opening a college division there. This is an aside, but it's interesting. I said, well, where do I go? Where are the offices and stuff? And they said, well, it's at the Texas School Book Depository Building on Dealey Plaza. I know.
Oh.
That was the building. And I thought, oh my God, we always think of it as very scary looking. It's just an office building. And that was Scott Forsman's building.
Oh my gosh.
And so I went to work there, and you'd go up into the room there, and here's all the boxes full of textbooks and everything where Oswald shot Kennedy. That's close as histories.
Yeah, I'm sure you had told us that. But
no, I just don't think about it very often, but that was kind of interesting. Yeah. Well, that's definitely an aside. You don't have to.
But you and David were at a national sales meeting?
I'd worked for about 2 weeks, and they said, come to Chicago. We're getting all of our new people that have worked here for a year and a half or so. We're getting everybody together and go over all the new books, and you all get to know each other and everything. And it's called the New Man's Conference. And it was 18 energetic young men and me. So I have my new little briefcase and suit and everything, because I was going to be a professional woman. Went to Chicago. Oh, before that, I had a friend in Dallas who said, when you get there, be sure you meet Dave Lett. I think you're going to like him. I think you'll like each other. He's going to grow grapes in Oregon. So I didn't know anything about wine. I didn't, certainly like anybody else in this country, hadn't heard of Pinot Noir, and I wasn't really sure where Oregon was. But I met David, and he was such a good salesman for his project that 3 months later, I was standing out in a field in Oregon with my new wedding shovel. So that I had a background in Western Civ and literature, and I had grown up on my grandparents' farm, had early childhood in my grandparents' farm, and loved it. And I was all set up for the romance of growing
back to the
wine
country.
and getting into this adventure. And David was so excited about his quest for growing the most romantic grape in the history of the world in a brand new place. And so you would be crazy to say no. It was great. So I just jumped. Do not try this at home.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to imagine you growing up in
the South, down
Yeah.
south, yeah. Alabama and Arkansas, and then going to school in Dallas.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And then, not quite on a whim, but pretty close, huh?
Pretty close, just
Getting married. And
it was exciting. He was so enthusiastic, and it sounded like an opportunity I would not ever get to have an adventure like that. Plus, he was really cute. He was very cute. I want to leave that out.
And you were 22?
And I had just had my 23rd birthday.
23, yeah.
And he had just turned 27. Our birthdays were right
Yeah,
there together.
right close, yeah.
So,
So here you were living in Silverton, which is 35 miles from here, on the other side of the Willamette Valley. I'm kind of assuming it was, I never saw it, but I'm assuming it was not a mansion.
it was a darling little apartment down on the Silver Falls Creek. It was right downtown. It was underneath the lawyer's office. It didn't have running water, though. It was just $40 a month. But you had to go upstairs and use the bathroom up by the lawyer's office.
Wow.
And fill a wine gallon jug with water, and that was the water downstairs to cook with and stuff. So, but it was great. It was neat. It was a wonderful little place to live.
So that was 66, and you lived there?
We lived there for a year, and then got pregnant and decided that was no place for a baby. But that year we lived there, we were driving back and forth to the new vineyard property and down to Corvallis to dig out we were digging out all the by then very substantially rooted young vines, which involved my new wedding shovel. So we got those vines out and got them all bundled and everything, and I was entranced to find out what cedar toe was. The cedar shavings, it smells so good, and we put them into burlap bags and wrap the bags so they would stay moist and the roots would stay good. And so, spent a lot of evenings trimming little root vines and things.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. So
we met in the summer, married in the fall, dug out all the vines and everything, and got ready to transfer them up here to the vineyard that we had made an offer on, and it had been accepted. And the farmer, before all the papers and everything went through, told us that we could start clearing and getting it ready. It was an old blown down prune orchard from when the Columbus Day storms.
Everybody.
Yeah, so that we were working all those places plus the book job.
Right.
So it was a full schedule.
Yeah. And did you, once you were pregnant, did you leave the book job?
Well, I left the book job as soon as David and I married.
Okay.
I left the paying book job.
Got it.
I got to keep the free book job.
Yeah, right. We don't pay you.
Yeah, so I did I was David's assistant.
Right.
Customer service rep, whatever the title might have been. So because he had to travel, he'd go out on 2-week trips. I traveled a lot with him though. And that was wonderful that first year because he went all the way down to Carmel and San Francisco and all the area, Idaho, through Oregon, Washington. And I didn't go to Alaska, but that was also part of his territory. But I got to see the Northwest. It was wonderful.
Oh, yeah, because you didn't know any of this.
I hadn't had any sort of experience with this part of the country. And so getting to travel with him all over was really fun and great. Yeah. And his dad lived in Salt Lake, so we'd go as far as Salt Lake and then all over.
Right, that makes sense. I assume that your life changed dramatically when Jim was born, and that was in 67?
Jim was born in 1968, in the spring of 1968. Yeah.
Okay. And by then you had moved over more?
We lived over in Carlton at that time. We moved from Silverton over to Carlton.
I had forgotten about Carlton, yes.
Yeah, and Carlton was this funky, sad little town full of loggers, and it was tough. And they thought we were, highly suspect, because I had hair that was clear down to here, and David had a beard. But he had grown a beard so that the professors at the college would take him seriously because he had such a baby face that they always thought he was one of the students. So he grew a beard and smoked a pipe and wore a tweed jacket and tried to look, kind of academic.
And you lived in Carlton until almost 70?
We lived in Carlton for about 2 years, 2.5 years. And Jason was born there in 1969. So, and we bought the house and this piece of property that joined on to the original vineyard in the fall of 1970.
The fall of 70. So around the time that the first grapes were coming off the
right, that was and this involves you. You and Jenny. I was going through some journals about 2 months ago, and I came across one from summer of 1970, or fall, and it was September, and it said, we just signed on our house, it's ours now. We're starting harvest, but it's a really rainy day. I'm gonna go up to Portland tomorrow with my friend Meredith, and we're going to a place called Contemporary Crafts Gallery. And check out, Meredith made these big concrete planters. They were beautiful. And so I went up to Portland with her. It was very exciting. Her daughter was gonna babysit for the babies. And so we were standing out on so I described this in my journal. We're standing out on the deck at Contemporary Crafts Gallery, and there's all this bamboo and stuff, and the rain is coming down, and I said that I looked through the bamboo down, and you could see a little cottage or a little studio down below, and all I could see was this woman's hands turning a pot. Well, when I read that the other day, I ran in and called Jenny, and I said, "Oh my God, Jenny, listen to this." And she said, "That was me."
So you saw her. You didn't have any contact beyond that.
No, I just saw those. But to have that in my journal was just really got me. Yeah. Because I didn't put very much in my journal. It was very special to get to write in it.
So that was
fall of 70.
You must have.
That was first harvest.
Did you have the turkey processing plant at that point?
Yes. We had worked really hard to design a winery and had a very nice little winery to build over on the hillside. Yeah. And we couldn't get anyone to loan us 15 cents. It was not even relatives. They all thought we were, nuts. That was just gonna pour it down a rat hole. So Jim McDaniel, who had the greenery over there in McMinnville, he was kind of interested in what we were doing. And he said, "Well, I've got this old building over here that's just full of junk, and so he says, you can clear out one of the rooms and use it if you want to." So we rented a room there for $25 a month. And that room, we made the first wine in, because we didn't have very much, so we didn't need a whole lot of room.
And was that what became the main room of the winery there?
No, it's one of the barrel rooms now.
Oh, okay.
But a couple of years, we still had no chance of getting any money, so the next year, Jim McDaniel said to us, "I'm just gonna sell that building if you want it. You can have the whole thing and all the refrigeration equipment and everything for $10,000. And we were like, "Oh, God, thank God," because it was 8,000 square feet, It had been built for food processing as an old turkey plant from World War II.
Right.
And it had drained floors and refrigeration equipment and everything. So it was not very pretty, and it was really needed a good, I don't even want to tell you how much it needed to clean up.
Yeah.
But so we bought the building. Yeah.
So that was a real find, and you bought that in the summer of 1970, and you had your first grapes, and made the
first Pinot Noir and a
the
little bit of Pinot Gris
in
the Willamette
the
Valley.
Willamette Valley in some time. Yeah.
A first vinifera wine, probably, since they have some history back in the 1890s and stuff, but that had long been forgotten. We didn't even know any of that history at the time. We thought we were definitely the first ever.
And as it turns out, a lot of that history was fabricated by the people who were trying to enhance their reputation. So,
oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
The gold medals and things.
Oh, but, there's always a lot of that.
Yeah. As Ginny and I and our friends Paul and Rita were thinking about moving out to the country and kind of having art studios, we ran into a realtor in Dundee who said people had planted grapes.
Oh.
We went and looked for those grapes. We never found any, but we ran into Dick Erath later in the afternoon. We had a friend in Portland who worked for Bill Blosser at Portland State.
Philman. Yeah.
And got her to introduce us, and so spent, I think, we had a day meeting in his office, and either then or sometime soon, he and Susan invited us to the little house down at the bottom.
Oh, yeah, they were living down on the farm.
Where they were living,
yeah.
right? To a May Day party. And to me, it seemed like all the industry was invited. I know for sure you and David and Jim and Jason were there, and there may have been others or not.
And it was the Blossers. That was a pretty good percentage of the industry.
Well, it was. In my fantasy,
it was bigger than that.
And
no, I didn't
don't
even know them yet.
Yeah, so.
So that March, that January, Bill and Susan showed up, basically the Coreys told us we needed to meet this young couple that were looking for land. And so we met them, and they purchased land up at the top of the hill. Right. And that March, I went up to Portland with Susan, and she said, she was going to drop in and meet. She introduced me to Ginny that day.
And what I'm trying to figure out, this was before we had met Susan. If it was March of 70.
Okay, well, so she was meeting you then, too. So she took me and then met Ginny.
Okay.
And Ginny and I we just really loved each other right off the bat.
Yeah.
And then in May, Bill and Susan invited you guys and us and the kids to a picnic down at their house. And you and David hit it off great.
Yep.
And I remember you all went off to look at grapes or do something, and Ginny came here to the house with me. And we started yakking then, and it was the beginning of God knows how many hours on the phone and talking and all that. So, yeah. So she's been my best friend for 50 years.
Yeah.
She's the kindest person I ever met. And, I treasure that. Yeah. So.
Well, I think we both looked to you and David as our role models of how we should be in this industry.
Because we had no idea what we were doing.
You were
either.
Just ahead of us, luckily. And,
just a little bit. Well, I was thinking your first project with David and with Dick Erath and Bill Blosser was you got
the land use.
You all got all this information together and started presenting to the Yamhill County Planning Commission, saying that these hillsides are really valuable. They're much more valuable. They can be much more valuable in vineyards than in subdivisions.
Right.
And David had been looking at the Dundee Hills for couple years or a year before he finally decided, I don't care. They're too good. I don't care if they are going to build houses here. They're too good. I'm going to buy property in the Dundee Hills. So, but they were all mapped out
Oh, yeah,
for
they were
subdivisions.
All since the 1920s.
Yeah. So you all prevailed, thank God.
Yeah, so, and it had a lot to do with the planning director.
Oh, what's his name?
It'll come back to me when I'm not having to remember it on the spot.
Was it Ken Friday?
No, it was before him.
Okay.
But we've been in contact. I mean, he's long since retired. He lives over in Happy Valley or someplace, but...
Well, he should get a stipend of wine.
Well, we need to get... I have this dream of having him and Bill Blosser and David
that'd be great.
in a little seminar to talk about this, because arguably Yamhill County is the center of Oregon's wine industry because we preserve the hillsides to be planted.
Yeah.
And Washington County didn't do as good a job, and this was as close as people could get without having to pay the prices for housing sites to plant grapes.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And they were all like these beautiful south-facing slopes and just the right, everything was perfect.
Right.
And I'm so glad. I'm so glad you all prevailed on that. That was good.
No, that was an important thing. There's no question. And the parallel universes between our two families are very substantial because, literally, not at that May Day party, but sometime that summer, we invited you over for dinner. This would have been
in Portland.
Yeah. Because we were still starting to build the house out here, and you brought this.
Oh, a bottle of our first wine. Well, now that would have been a little later. When would this have been bottled? This is 1970.
It would have been bottled in July or August, and it would have been right after that we would have had the dinner, and David probably brought that in, not necessarily that bottle, but one that looked just like it.
Well,
and that was the first bottle of Willamette Valley wine I'd ever had, and probably most people had ever had.
That was our first vintage, and Chuck Curry had his first vintage that year too. This was our first Pinot Noir. And David was disappointed in it when it came in because he thought the color was a little too light and it wasn't like perfect. And he wanted our first wine. So we had a friend, Clive Van Cleve, and Doug Lynch. They were working on a label, this calligraphy and label, but they also did this little fun. It was going to be for just less formal wines.
Right.
And we could do it whatever we wanted, white or red or whatever. But so David decided to go ahead and put the first Pinot Noir in this, the 70 Pinot Noir. Years later, we tasted it, or several years later, we tasted it, and it was fine, and it was great. And he said, I could kick myself for putting it in the. People thought it was May wine.
But I was so impressed that here was this person who had made this bottle.
Brought in a real bottle of wine.
Which was, I mean, that was a big deal. I mean,
it was proof. So he brought a real bottle of.
But it was made by somebody that I knew, and
it was made here and grown
it was made here. I was used to bottles of wine that, I mean, I wasn't all that used to wine, but bottles of wine were sold in the store, and they were made by who knows, but
some mythical place.
Yes, yeah. But and this, it made it so real that if you planted grapes, you could actually make wine. And the year after 71, the harvest of 72, we went down and started. Don't forget the corners and marching around in the bins.
Having fun.
I mean, and really saw what the process was of making wine. The year after that, I was the first official unpaid intern.
That's right. And I was thinking about, I don't think we had a crew then. It was still pretty much a one-man operation. And I know David was very grateful for your help and your camaraderie.
Well, I mean, there are several great photos that are in all the PowerPoints to show what the experience was. So,
You forgot that part.
I forgot it totally.
Oh, yeah. Put her up there.
But that's yet another one of the things that connected our two families. This is really Ginny expressing her thanks to you. It's more than that too, but it's specifically you.
It was our connection. Yeah.
And that you're the only person in the wine industry that was on our bottles. Everybody else were friends but you were both a friend and obviously in the wine business. And so I think this was, for the longest time, this was what our winery was known for, was this label with you on it.
The woman on the label.
Well, it was the woman, but this label had you on it. And for those that bothered to look at what it said, someplace, maybe not this vintage, but somewhere or other, you were identified, and I think people figured that out. And
Jason said, "Oh, I can't even go in a wine shop without my mom looking at me."
well, I threatened to ask you what you thought about being on our label, but
I thought it was fun and kind of glamorous, and what I loved to do was it was really mess with people's minds. Why is she on your label and why are you on their label? That's weird, So that led into the whole friendship thing and and it was fun. And I got a new appreciation for Jenny's art because it took hours and hours and hours of drawing, but we got to talk the whole time, so that was great. Yeah, it was fun.
Good. Thank you for that contribution to our success. We opened this wine.
I know.
I
was getting kind of thirsty.
Yeah, exactly.
I was thinking about how good that would taste. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing this.
Yeah. Well,
2018 Pinot Gris.
Yeah. At some point, I want to talk about Pinot Gris with you.
Yeah. I mean, part of the legacy of David and Irie is being the first to plant Pinot, but also Pinot Gris. Obviously, making the first wine, and that legacy is almost like a story that's bigger than life, because it's existed for so long and been repeated.
Sort of a belly button story, isn't it? Where everything sprang from.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But Pinot Gris has always been overshadowed by Pinot Noir because 70% of what we have planted here is Pinot, and it's what the place is most associated with. And yet, David's vision for Pinot Gris was almost that it would be the white version or the white wine like Pinot Noir.
I think so. I think he had enjoyed it very much in Alsace, and he thought since it's so closely related to Pinot Noir, it could be a really good grape in the same climatic conditions. And he wanted to try it out. There weren't any vines in the country, except for there were 4 vines in the kind of the mother collection down at Davis. Yeah. And so they let him take some cuttings. I think he took 180 little things like this and got those rooted. And then, then we took some cuttings off of those and got those rooted and and finally, had enough vines to make something with. But we made some Pinot Gris that first year.
Did you?
Kept it separate. Really, we liked it. And I suppose for the next 10 years, we were the only producer of Pinot Gris. Oh, yeah. You and Ponzi's got some cuttings starts from us. Yeah. And think 1981 was I know that 1981 was the first Ponzi Pinot
Yeah,
Gris.
we were 1984. Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyway, as the three of you all had Pinot Gris to schlep to the market, you went out together and did a little Pinot Gris team.
Well, and we did a joint tasting at the Heathman.
Cheers. I want to have some of this to talk about.
Indeed.
Cheers.
Thank you for bringing this.
Yeah.
One of the interesting topics to me was vis-a-vis David and you was Burgundy. Mm-hmm. In '73, when I was working with David, probably half the mentions of Burgundy were kind of negative for David. Well, in this sense that he was concerned that there weren't enough good winemakers in Burgundy, and that there was a lot of, not everybody's wine by any stretch of the imagination, but that there were Burgundies that were not as good as they should be. And I think in his mind, the Willamette Valley was allowing, as long as we would focus on quality, there was a better chance of there being a wider breadth of quality wine being made. And I bring up Burgundy because one of the things, of course, that we did together was woo some neighbors up the street here a little bit to come from Burgundy to Oregon. And that was a bit of a joint venture also, where our joint distributor in Oregon, Henny Hinsdale, was the distributor for Drouin, and Robert apparently got Karen and Howard Hinsdale to get you and Bethel Heights and us to agree to take the daughter of
Veronique. Yes.
Veronique as an intern.
Yes.
And what that led to, we couldn't have possibly imagined. We thought she was coming over for experience, and apparently what she went back with was, in essence, a plea to her father, wouldn't it be great to be making wine in Oregon? And I don't know whether that was coming from him to her, getting her to agree to be the winemaker here, or, but in any case.
Or to give a woman a chance to be a winemaker.
Yeah, there's that too.
And there was also some adventure.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, and from Robert's standpoint, I think he was curious what it would be like to make wine without
so many restrictions.
Yes.
You know. Yeah. The Burgundy system is very tight on what you can do, what you can grow, where you can do it, and that probably was some of what David might have been referring to.
And that might have been too.
That might have been what he was meaning.
Yeah.
That there was some great wines coming out, but that there was a lot of just sort of ordinary stuff being, plonked along.
Yeah.
And that's true with any wine industry,
Sure.
except Oregon.
Well,
We have a minimum of plonk, I have to say, because you guys, all of us, most of us, were highly idealistic when we were working together to make our regulations and our expectations and our sort of marketing efforts and all of that. We knew we couldn't make it on quantity.
Right.
So we wanted to make it on quality, and good for us.
Yeah.
We did it, and we created a precious thing.
Yeah.
I don't think you can't.
No, I mean,
you can't just pretend that that's something. We really worked hard on making quality wines.
and it seems to me that, and I don't know how much we talked about it, but that seems to have always been part of the conversation in my mind.
It was incessant at our house,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I'm sure it was. We talked a lot. There were lots of meetings, as you probably recall. And there were some people who thought, well, we should have we should allow up to X percentage of other grapes to be put in, and we should be able to do this, and we should be able to do that. And I remember that you and David and several others were like, no, let's do it as stringent as we can.
Right.
Let's aim for the best.
Right.
And proud of us for that.
Yeah.
Because it costs money to do it that way.
Potentially. And I think the thing that we were betting on, which in the end probably was true, was that by having higher standards and by really focusing on making the best possible wine, that we would first attract attention and then support for the kinds of pricing that we really needed to make this a viable life. I mean, the Willamette, the wine industry in the Willamette Valley, certainly in 50 years, was successful by anybody's calculation.
Beyond our wildest dreams, I think. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's hard to point to another region in the New World which has such an impeccable reputation and which allows people to believe. I mean, if you talk to sort of casual wine consumers in New York or London or Tokyo, and you mention Willamette Valley, they say Pinot Noir to you,
and high quality Pinot Noir. Yeah.
And it's kind of amazing that in a lifetime we created that. So, going back to the Drouhin story, both you and David and Ginny and I and our winemaker, and Lizzie for that matter, all went to Burgundy in 1988, sort of at Robert's insistence, if you will, because he really wanted to talk about what probably was a fantasy at that point in his mind of doing something in Oregon.
Yes, he said, I would like to do something in Oregon.
Yeah. And he got us looking for land. Your vineyard manager, Joel, found the piece of land that they first bought. I put $1,000 of earnest money onto it, and things started to come together. The story to me that was really intriguing is after you and David came back from Burgundy and the land was purchased, you and David and Ginny and I were having conversations about how did we want to interact with this? Because the first concept that the Drouhins broached to us was sort of a joint venture. And I don't know when you were in Bones staying in the
staying with them,
yeah. If they had talked to you about that same thing as a joint venture, or were they talking about it being their thing at that point?
I think it was pretty general. It was like, can we create something? What do you think? What do you know?
Yeah. When Robert came for IPNC, the first IPNC in '87, he was then talking about something he was going to do, but he needed help and he needed connections and
I think we had been cautious about, we'll be happy to be your friends and your good neighbors. And he asked David, I remember, to say, would you be my caution, meaning help me navigate the, some of the politics of it and that kind of thing, to not be seen as somebody, swanning in from Burgundy and taking over everything. And so he asked David to help him be cautious about it. But I think the four of us, decided that we wouldn't get formally involved, that it would be better if we all continued to do our individual things.
And I know one of the things that Robert still, I think, makes the experience of the first person in Burgundy doing a winery outside of Burgundy and doing it here in the Willamette Valley is the reception that we gave to him and his family, where they're still everybody's good friends.
Sure. I mean, I got a lovely note from Robert not too long ago to see if we're all okay and saying that they're tired of their garden, of being at home. But
wow, that's great.
We have a kind of a backstory to that. Of course, you know. Our mutual friend Becky Wasserman came over here in 1978 or maybe early 79 to sell barrels. And she was kind of interested in what was going on here. Oh, they're growing Pinot Noir here in Oregon. And she took a couple of bottles of our 75 Pinot Noir back to France, and unbeknownst to us, entered it into a tasting in Paris that was sponsored by the Goemio Gourmet magazine. And it was wines from all over the world. And
but it was specifically only, no, it was all sorts of wines.
all kinds of things. It was all sorts of things.
No, yeah, right.
And not all of them strictly wonderful wines. It was just kind of a melee.
Yeah.
But she entered our wines into the Pinot Noir category, and they came in and part of the top 10. And Robert made us the feelings that this was not very
professional.
Not very professional, or not, he said, I would like to have the Pinot Noirs in this category against some of my Pinot Noir, more professionally made, or not professionally made,
right.
More
higher quality wine.
Higher quality yes. Burgundy.
Yep.
So Goemio agreed to restage the tasting in Beaune, and Becky was one of the judges, and there were 11 other judges, and they did the tasting at the Drouhin Cellars. No, Hall of Justice of the Dukes of Burgundy. I remember that was quite impressive, especially when you say it in French. Yeah. Now we knew about this second tasting because we had been contacted to please send wine, more 75 Pinot Noir. So what for? And so Becky said, you want to do this. So we sent more wine, and they had the tasting, and our 75 Pinot Noir came in second, 0.2 of a point behind 1959 Chambolle-Musigny, which still impresses me. Still get a chill thinking of it. And boom, it hit the press, and it was in the international press and all over the place, and every newspaper in the country was calling us, and it was really exciting because that was our fifth vintage? Fifth vintage.
Sixth vintage.
And it's like all of a sudden, we had people calling. I'm sure they were calling other people in Oregon too.
Well,
do you have wine that you could sell?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, that was 1990.
That was, no, it was 1979 was the first tasting, and then 1980 was the tasting in February and in Burgundy. Yeah. And so that was, I think some of the folk story might have been that Robert was upset. I don't know if he was upset or not, but he certainly became more interested, I'm sure.
Yep. No, he definitely did. He made,
in what's going on here.
Between then and the internship of
which was 5 or 6 years later. Yeah.
But he made one visit himself and addressed the Willamette Valley. Well, what would it have been? Probably the Oregon Wine Growers Association meeting that was meeting in Eugene that time. Yeah. And he came into a meeting. He was selling wine, but he came in and sort of addressed us and then left. But
we had lunch with him, and he was so dignified and lovely. He has lovely manners. He's exactly what he should be.
Yeah.
It was quite nice. Yeah. And he was very gracious.
So one of the things I've tried to figure out is what role did you define for yourself as opposed to David's role? Okay. Is that a fair question to ask?
Yes, and it's a little bit two roads that I can take. The first was that when our Jim was born in 1968, We didn't know it right at first, but within a year or so, there were problems. So he was diagnosed with autism in the spring of, well, actually, the day before that picnic that we were all together.
Yeah.
The day before we had gotten the diagnosis of autism. Even getting the diagnosis of autism at that time was very rare because nobody, it was worse than Pinot Noir. Nobody knew anything about autism, and it was a terrible thing to get, you know.
Well, there were. I mean, at some point you were being blamed for it.
Oh well, at the time, mothers caused autism. They were called refrigerator mothers, and I thought, well, I'm not very refrigeratory, and I also have a perfectly normal other little kid, and I trusted that we weren't causing this problem. I knew we weren't, but it was hard times. Emotionally, it was hard. But because I had this child who had a lot of special needs, and Jason, who was just smart as a whip that I had to keep up with as well. Well, Jim was really smart too, but it was our, you know, I had a bunch of mother work to do, and teaching and advocating and finding out and all this. So what happened was, I was not able to be as active formally out in the wine bit, or even go to a lot of the events or any of that kind of stuff. So I was home, but I was real interested and involved. So I did it. I was in the background. I did a lot of editing, writing, organizing, calling, doing a lot of stuff that would maybe back up what David was doing and what was going on, but just stuff that I could do from home. I was also very involved with our business. And I was doing all the secretarial and the backup and whatever.
Yeah, in the days before the internet where things had to be typed out and, God.
Typed over again. That was what, if you made a mistake, you had to type it over. And also, I remember this, if the phone rang, you had to go answer it. And having a child with autism that you stop in the middle and say, excuse me, I have to go answer the phone, does not work. So that was one of the things that was difficult. But so my early decades in the wine business were paddling as fast as I could underneath, because we had lots of company, we had lots of things going on, lots of entertaining that we did, trying to do events and all that sort of stuff. And at the same time having this little, I don't even know what to call it.
A whole other world
was going on that I was trying to deal with. And then I also got very involved in advocacy for autism services because there was nothing. Nothing. No, they didn't know anything about autism. And so we had to do the research, information. Then I started advocating. I got involved with the state and was on the board of Developmental Disabilities Council, and I was president of the Autism Council of Oregon for several terms. And it makes me tired to talk about it. I don't know how we did it.
Yeah, but because that took every hour of the day.
Every hour of the day and then some. So. I was very busy, but it wasn't out. I spent more of my outward energy working with the schools and the state and that sort of thing on autism. And wine, David kind of took that as his, we helped each other, but that was his prong and autism was mine. And so that's what we plugged in. But my official title at the Eyrie Vineyards has always been editor-in-chief and director of ephemera. So I can't exactly put my finger on what I did all those years, but they had an effect. Yeah. And so one of the things we had to do early on was come up with a lot of marketing ideas that hadn't been developed yet. And so one of the things that David and I did was put on the first Thanksgiving weekend wine tastings.
And was that 73?
I think it was 74 or 75 that we did the first one.
Yeah.
And I remember we had we kind of partnered up with Gary Lawrence, who didn't have his gallery yet, but he knew a lot of artists in the area. And I knew Jenny and Rita and, all the artist friends that we had made through you all. And so we had a big art show, wine.
You had a guitarist, I think.
We did. We had, who we got was Timothy Swain from Reed College, and he had an early chamber music group.
Oh gosh, yes he did.
That was beautiful. And they came out to play, and we had Hank and Helen Hazen brought their crepe cart out, and we were doing crepes in the winery and all that. And it was pouring. I remember this first morning of the first day of the tasting. I was like, oh, what if we did all this? And it was pouring sideways rain outside. And I opened the door, and there were people all the way down the block and all around, because there was nothing else to do. Nobody had gone to a wine tasting before.
No.
And so it was a fabulous event. Hundreds of people came. We were all exhausted afterwards. I don't know if anybody actually made any money, but it was a great event.
I mean, you sold some wine at that. I know that.
Yes, we did.
Once it got developed.
Yeah, it was good to sell some wine.
Yeah.
So that was the first of the Thanksgiving wine tasting weekends, right. And we're still doing them, aren't we?
Yes. I mean, at some point, I presume it was the Yamhill County Wineries Association that really wanted to have there be an event for all the wineries, not just...
Right. Not just sort of informally. So that was 1983 that we had our first joint, and everybody went to all the wineries in Yamhill County were open. What were there, like 10?
Yeah, it certainly wasn't much more than that, but it was more than one.
Oh, you asked me about the role of women in Yamhill County in the wine industry. We did everything that, needed doing. And I think you guys all knew that we were out in the vineyard and the winery, and whatever needed work got worked on. But, so we didn't feel like, anyway, I just remember we all gathered for a photograph of the Yamhill Wine Growers Association brochure. Or maybe it was just to advertise the Thanksgiving tasting weekend. But we were all gathered over at Blosser's, and I remember we all kind of got ready for the photograph, and the guy says, no, just the men, the winemakers. And so, I've got the photograph, I'll show you. You were in it.
Oh, I know the photograph.
Yeah, but he said, no, just the men, the winemakers. And so here's this iconic photograph now of you all gathered together, but you can't hear all the women in the background going, catcalling you guys. We were hooting.
I didn't know that backstory. I probably was there. I mean, I was there.
You were there, but it was just funny. He said, no, just the men, the winemakers.
Wow.
I know. He would be rid out of town on a rail at this point.
Well, I mean, obviously it was a different time, but
yes.
But still, that's pathetic.
Well, and also, we took it as a laugh. We thought it was funny, kind of.
Yeah, I wonder.
Kind of funny.
Yeah. I'm glad you shared that, because I didn't. I certainly didn't remember that, and it's a particularly not very positive corner of.
Well, we had some other things. I remember I had Jim in a program up in Portland when he was little, and so as long as I was going to Portland, I was delivering wine to the restaurants and stuff. So I would drop Jim off and go to deliver wine, and then come pick him back up when school was out, the program was out. And I had to deliver wine to a couple of restaurants where the people there did not think that women should be involved at all talking about wine. I won't name any names, but I thought that was funny. Just, you can deliver the wine, but don't talk to me about any of the wine.
Wow.
So, because I was a woman.
Yeah.
That's a long time ago.
It is.
Thank goodness.
I was reading Maria Ponzi's book, and she had that. She was relaying stories about her mother dealing with the same thing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and it was Bill from, what was the great French restaurant that was the first?
Bill McLaughlin.
Bill McLaughlin.
That L'Auberge.
Yeah, L'Auberge, exactly. That Bill McLaughlin gave Maria Ponzi, after he first kind of turned her down and said, Oregon? He called her back and said, let's try a few bottles. Mm-hmm. But you and Bill McLaughlin and his wife, and I mean, you became friends.
We were
too.
friends. Well, now this was early on. I'm not sure L'Auberge was even quite open yet. But the doorbell rang, and I went to the door, and there was Bill McLaughlin and Mike Vidor, who I had not met before. But they said, we've heard there's some wine grapes growing here. He said, do you know anything about it? And I said, yeah, that's us, and we've got vineyards planted here. And so they said, well, do you have any wine? And I think we had, well, what year would that have been? It was very early. It was early 70s.
It's got to have been very early, because when we came back from Korea in '69, L'Auberge was open.
They were open in '69?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, I don't, but at that point it was Michael Vidor only.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, so
But
they were definitely in on the ground floor.
Yeah.
So yes, and they carried our wine for many years thereafter, and we're still friends. I don't see them very often, but right. I mean, Mike Vidor's gone, but I don't see Bill. But I always thought he was a lovely person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he was a philosophy major too.
Yes.
So.
Were you a philosophy major?
Well,
David was
point.
A philosophy major.
Yeah.
What do you do with literature degrees and philosophy degrees?
You go into the wine business.
You farm. Yeah. Of course you do.
Yeah. It's a preparatory degree for life.
Absolutely. And it gives you a lot to think about.
So much of the wine industry, particularly in Yamhill County, but really the whole North Willamette Valley, the story goes back to you and David. And it's not that you necessarily told people what to do or told them that they couldn't do this or that, but I think it was a very strong process of leading by example, if you will, that you were showing a way forward where you could be focused on quality, didn't have to be big, sell it yourself, not have a tasting room, do the right thing in terms of taking care of the earth, and have a successful business.
I can't believe it worked. I just can't believe it.
And yet, in essence, people in New Zealand look to Oregon. People in both BC and to some extent Ontario have looked to Oregon for direction. I mean, we've got people in South Africa that talk about the system, the legal systems that we have in place, and how did we do this, and how did we get the wineries even to cooperate? And I think the thing that is most impressive when you look at Oregon compared to these other New World areas is, by and large, we were friendly. By and large, we worked with each other. And it's not that we didn't want to be successful or profitable in our own right, but there was a certain feeling that we had to have the industry.
And we had to stick together.
Yeah.
We had to stick together, that it was good for everybody to do.
And how would you describe your role and David's role in helping ensure that collaboration was part of this? Because it doesn't just happen.
Well, okay, let's see. I'll think about this.
Yeah.
because it wasn't anything planned or you know.
No, you didn't give lectures on collaboration. I mean, that.
I think, well, I always go, it's always a combination of luck and pluck whenever these things happen, you know. And I think the luck was in having a group of people that probably we accidentally had a good chemistry together, pretty good chemistry, and a pretty good bent. There were people who were kind of going rogue,
right.
But for the most part, once these ideals were explained or illustrated, it was like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, let's stick together. Let's focus on quality. Let's hang out. Well, I was thinking the other day, wow, you know, Nick's played a big role without a plan about it.
Right. Nick's Italian
Cafe in McMinnville opened in 1978, and he let us, as a wine community, bring our kids, come hang out there until the wee hours, play music, you know, sing, just have fun, and get to know each other, not in a meeting, not in anything formal or anything where we were, you know, working.
Where
we were playing
together.
We were hanging out, so we got to know each other. Our children got to know each other, and I think that played a big part.
Yeah.
Activities like that, but that kind of atmosphere helped us be friends as well as, you know, in the industry, building an industry.
In an industry.
And it led to a lot of kind of informal tribalism or something, you know.
Yeah.
So I think the luck was in having some of those things happen that we couldn't have planned. We couldn't have said, "Oh, let's have a gathering place," and this is, you know. So I think we're a lucky industry.
Yeah.
As well as, you know, with lots of courage and ideals.
One of the things that I point to is that David and Chuck and Dick Erath and Dick Ponzi and a number of the others, even me just barely, were all born before the end of World War II. We weren't really baby boomers.
We were pre-baby boomers.
We were, whatever that was. But it seems to me that that previous generation, which came of age in the 50s and
early 60s, yeah.
And really lived through the idealism of the beginning of the Kennedy years, that idealism sort of became part of our industry.
Yeah, I think that we brought that to the industry, that idealism.
And that had the industry not started for 10 more years,
it would have been different.
It would have been very different because it wouldn't have had that idealistic base that building a successful industry is almost more important than the individual success of any entity.
Well, and I think to that point, a lot of us might not have gotten into the thing in the first place if we hadn't been kind of idealistic and looking towards that. You know?
We would have been looking for something that would make us money.
Yeah, or just,
And instead, we were looking for something that we could build to be important.
So this is so creative and it's wide open and we can do anything. Yeah, it was, you know, as I was going through a lot of memories here, I was thinking there were a lot of sad times and there were some scary times. And a lot of us probably thought, you know, are we going to make it? You know?
I know the Blossers at one point, Bill Blosser told me he had 3 vintages of Pinot in his warehouse. Mm-hmm. This was, when would it have been? Probably mid-'80s, something like that. And he wasn't sure how they could ever sell that amount of wine.
It took us 2 years to sell 200 bottles of wine, the first couple hundred. And we were pooping along really very, very slowly until that tasting in France. And that Now look, that's what, 15 years?
Yeah.
That's happening overnight.
Yeah, and even at that didn't go like this.
No.
It just
It came
tilted
up.
the curve up a little bit.
Well, what actually, I just remember the fabulous thing about after the news came out about that tasting in Burgundy was that we could actually get a distributor outside of Oregon to answer to talk about it. You know, they just weren't interested. It was just weird stuff, you know.
Yeah.
So anyway, whew, I'm glad. I am very surprised every time I think about it that this actually worked out.
What was the worst or the closest to disaster that you can remember?
The worst vintage we ever had was 1984.
Yeah. I mean, that barn.
In that barn. And so what they did was they were picking grapes into, were you involved here with that?
No,
or?
well, we had our own version of it, but I knew all about it.
All right. Well, we were picking into those yellow plastic bins and taking them into the barn and stacking them. And we had those big fans and heaters. So we were warming and drying. It rained and rained. That was Texas rain. That wasn't Oregon rain.
Yeah,
that was drops that big, and it was pouring every day and cold. So they were picking the grapes. The tractors were getting stuck in the mud. Everybody was miserable. But we unloaded the trucks, put the grapes in, warmed them up and everything, then put them in the trucks, covered them with tarps, and got over to the winery as fast as they could and processed the grapes. And David always said after that, if we did 84, we can do anything. Don't even worry about it, you know. So that was the worst. And the wines came out good. Yeah. They were good. But whew, that was hard.
What was your proudest moment?
My proudest moment was our 50th anniversary of Adelsheim Vineyards, watching Jason put together and conduct that fabulous program that he put on. And I thought to myself, this just ties a bow on the whole thing, you know? David would have been so proud, and I was certainly proud, and I felt like our legacy was in very good hands, and that also Jason was going to do a great job of carrying the torch further for the industry, which he does. He is very involved. Yep. So that was my proudest moment, and I think my best contribution to the Oregon wine industry is Jason. So I hope he doesn't see this. He'll be embarrassed. But I do feel that way. Yeah. Of course, I am his mother. So. Well, but he's doing a great job.
He is doing a great job, and he isn't just doing what David would have done.
No, he's being very creative, and he's calling on lots of things that he's interested in, which I am happy that he's finding. He's doing label designing, and he's being involved in all kinds of stuff. Yes, he's doing his own artwork on the labels, and he's planting new varieties, and he's really, it's his. He's made it his. Right. And this is his 15th anniversary as winemaker this year too, which is sort of amazing. But I wish David could just get a little furlough every once in a while and come back and check on how everything's going, because I know he would approve.
Yeah, I think he would. He might question this or that from Jason, but
I don't know. Honestly, I think Jason's a better winemaker.
Oh, no, we're not. Oh my God.
You can cut that off, but I do.
No, I think he's doing a very good job. And I think he has made the brand very current.
It's his, yeah.
Well, it's his.
Yes.
But it's a very up-to-date brand.
Yes.
It isn't a past brand.
Right. It's not, one of the old, you know.
I mean, it's that too, but the branding is for today, and it is currently attractive. I mean, the Old Vine Pinot Gris, for instance, is really out there wine, and I give him a lot of shit about it, because it's kind of like his version of orange wine, except that it's delicious.
I know. So I hope we can keep those old vines for a little longer.
Yeah, it's cool.
So, yes.
Diana, thank you for...
Well, this was fun. I was nervous about it, and also the weight of memories is heavy sometimes.
Yeah, it is.
And I was thinking, though, but we had a lot of fun. A lot of music, a lot of wine, a lot of great food, wonderful people.
There was a night of dancing even.
Do you remember the night we cleared, you and I, we cleared the dance floor to the kazoo band playing Varsity Drag? We were great.
I don't know that I remembered the kazoo band part.
That was the best part. Yeah. That's the best part, the kazoo band. We were great, or at least we thought we were.
And really, what else matters?
We might have to do it again. I'm not sure I can move like that again.
Well, this was both daunting and fun.
Yeah, great.
And I so appreciate you not just sitting down now, but discussing this and thinking about it and coming up with, I think what you will have contributed to this is the special gravitas that really the founding family of the Willamette Valley wine industry can provide in a way that nobody else can. And
thank you for asking.
Oh,
for the interview. I've really enjoyed it, and of course I love you.
Yeah, no, it's so great to be with you, and thanks.